guys, Chris from Average Eskate Reviews here, and today in this video we're finally going to give you the review of the unlimited X-loaded setups that we got some time ago. Now something I'm going to say is that I'm really glad that we waited this long to give you these reviews, because aside from our skating ability having improved, a lot's also happened with unlimited X-loaded in terms of updates that they've made to their setups, which really affects the way that they perform and the experience that we have as riders. Now what I'm going to be talking about is going to be the Icarus deck. With the original setup that I had was the cruiser setup, which if you remember in our original video was one hub motor and 2 batteries. Top speed was about 23 miles an hour, range was somewhere around the 13-mile mark. But what I did say that I was going to do in that video was attach an extra motor onto it, because the setup from Unlimited X Loaded is actually a modular system, so it's very easy to add a motor, add a battery, or take one away. So I'm going to be using the Icarus deck with 2 of their hub motors and 2 of their batteries. So this effectively is going to be increasing my top speed, increasing my braking ability, and my general fun on the board. Now when we look at what's changed in terms of the app that you get with the Unlimited X Loaded setups, is the fact that they've allowed you to add what I'm going to refer to as a cruise control mode. Of course they call it something different, but this effectively means that you kick to push the board, or rather kick to start the board, and once it picks up a pace of you rolling, it'll actually hold that speed. So you don't have to touch the remote, you don't have to do anything. Like a lot of boards do have cruise control, but you have to press a button. This is completely automatic. Now, it doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but if you're riding just doing like light, gentle carves, or if you're somebody that does tricks or dancing on boards, this is pretty ideal because it acts like a traditional longboard without you having to worry about kicking all the time. It's also quite nice because it means that you can do a lot without having to worry about where the remote is. It doesn't seem like a very big deal, but it's definitely a feature that I appreciate, which leads me very swiftly onto one of the things that I don't like about this board, which is probably the only thing I don't like about it, and that's the kick to start. So far, we've not really found anything in the settings that turns this off. If the board is completely stationary, you need to kick and start rolling a little bit. It's a very, very gentle pace you need to get to before you can actually engage the trigger and start, using the power that the board has. It doesn't sound like a big deal. It's actually quite nice for safety, but when you're doing tricks like 180s and 360s on the board, if you 180 and want to go flying off in the other direction, you have to kick, and then go. You can't just keep going. So it's a little bit of a peeve, not a pet peeve, I could say, not something that is a major detractor for the board, but definitely something I had to mention. Now, some of the other upgrades that you've gotten from this update that Unlimited have provided you with on the app is the fact that the speed of this board, or the max speed, was 46 kilometers an hour, which is roughly 26 miles an hour. Now, with this new upgrade, they've moved the speed from 46 kilometers to 50 kilometers, which works out in mph roughly about 31 miles an hour. Now, based on the size of the deck, the Icarus deck, the length and the width of it, this isn't, you guys know that we like speed, but 31 on a setup like this is not something that I feel like you really need. I mean, it's nice that it can go that quick, but I definitely am not going to be going 31 miles an hour on a board this size. I just don't think that that's what this type of board was designed for, but it's pretty cool that it can do that. So any of those downhill skaters that are looking at picking up an electric board, maybe this is the one for you if you like that size of a deck, that width, and that speed. Now, swiftly from there, just looking at the app that comes with this board, using the app is a great experience. It's super easy to do any updates that the board has, or even that the remote has, all from within the app. And it's also, like, the general interface, I have to say, is the best that I've ever seen. It kind of reminds me of if you got the app that Boosted had back in the day with the app that Evolve have and smashed them together. Also like X-Way's app as well. X-Way's app is pretty good as well. I feel like it's a collection of all of them kind of like refined. I've not seen another skateboard app that works as well as this. You can switch different modes, you can tweak and fine-tune different settings in terms of acceleration, top speed, unlocking that full top speed of 50 kilometers an hour or 31 kilometers an hour. But I will mention you have to sign up to the app to be able to unlock the full top speed of the board, which it's not really a deal breaker. Otherwise, if you don't do this, then the speed of the board is capped at 22 kilometers an hour. So if you're figuring out if you have one of these boards and you don't know why you can't get the top speed, you have to sign up to the app and then go into it to unlock it. But the app, really, really nice one. I really like what they've done with this. Now, when we look at the ride of this board, this is where I'm really glad that we waited to create this review, because the way that we ride and the things that we do on skateboards has changed over the last few months. Now, back in the day, I was kind of just fixated on speed and carving, but now I'm really fixated on sliding and drifting boards. And this is where this board really comes into its own element. The orangutan wheels that this board has, the sleeves for the rear hub motors, I said in the first impressions it was the best and smoothest and most comfortable hub motor board I've ever ridden. That's not changed. That's definitely still true. The wheels that it has are 80A, which is exactly the same as what I'm using on my Evolve Stoke. So in terms of the feel that you get when you're sliding the board out, the type of sort of grip and bite that the wheels have over the ground, it's exactly the same. But because of the shape of the deck, the springiness and sponginess of that Icarus deck, and also the unusual shape and how your feet sit on it, sliding this board is incredibly fun. It's so snappy because of the length of the deck to be able to whip this board around and do a lot of awesome tricks with it. Doesn't have a kicktail, but because of the grip tape that's right on the end of the deck and the shape of the deck, you can still tic-tac-toe the nose of the board around and lift it up if you need to. So this board, in terms of tricks, sliding, drifting, it's amazing. Now, also in terms of the ride itself, so when you're carving with this board, taking corners, the quality of the wheels that it has and the way that the deck reacts, the way that the Paris trucks react, the fact that they have their own bushings, all of this really adds up to an overall really nice riding experience. The board holds almost as well as the rubber tires that are featured on the Onsra standard, which is surprising. These hub wheels hold better than any other urethane wheels that I've personally tried or ridden with. So if you're looking for a board that's fun to carve, that absorbs the vibrations, that still allows you to use those orangutan wheels if that's what you're into, this is definitely going to be a big one to consider. Now, in terms of the way that the actual hub motors perform, one thing I mentioned in the first impressions video is that the braking was a bit unpredictable. It'd either be incredibly strong or quite soft and loose. But since the app update, this problem didn't seem to really exist. You pulled back on the brake, it was very, very strong. This is something that can be dialed in on the app to kind of control how intense you want it. Exactly the same with the acceleration, and that's something else that we could have played with a little bit more as well, because the acceleration, if anything, for doing tricks and sliding in 180s and stuff like that, the acceleration was a little bit too aggressive, but it's something that we, if we really needed to, could have just reduced in the app. So the overall performance of these hub motors since the update has made a massive difference. Very impressed. Now, in terms of the range that we were getting from this board, it's somewhere between 8 and 12 miles, based on the way that we ride, which is normally quite aggressive. The advertised range is 13 miles. Of course, the modular batteries allow you to switch one out and switch another one in if you needed to. Each battery roughly gives you 7 miles of range. So if we wanted to, we could extend the range of the board, but from what they've quoted on the website to what we're getting, it's pretty accurate. And it, again, I've always said sort of around the 10-mile mark, 14-mile mark is pretty much perfect for my riding needs. Now, last point is going to be the remote. If you remember in the first impressions again, we said that the remote was very small in comparison to what we're used to using, and the fact that it only has 2 buttons and one little dial to get you to move forward or brake if you need to. I'm kind of starting to now really appreciate remotes that have a trigger for acceleration and a separate trigger or button for the brake. That's definitely something that I like now, to have acceleration and braking independent from each other, not on the same sort of device in terms of like a scroll wheel. So for me, I'd prefer the remote to be more like the Evolve, but again, that's probably because that's what I've been riding the majority of all of this time. If the remote does still feel a little small when it's in your hands, especially if you've got gloves on. If they're bulky gloves, it might be a bit hard to get a feel for the remote, but if you're using flatland gloves like I was today, you don't really have an issue. Once you kind of just hold the remote and get going, you quickly forget about the size, but at a glance and when it hits your hand for the first time, you definitely notice how small it is. Now, when we're looking at who this board is suggested for, I think if you're coming from a traditional longboarding like background, or that's the type of riding that you did, this is definitely a great transition for you to move into the world of electric skateboards. This is essentially a longboarding deck with this system mounted on the bottom of it that gives you the power that an electric board has. It doesn't compromise on a lot of the things that I feel like longboard riders would still want. You still have a decent clearance with the ground and the body of the board. And it's not heavy like a lot of the electric skateboards that we're used to. This board is very, very light because of the system that it has. I thought at the beginning this board would only be for people that were coming from longboarding experience and wanted to get an electric board. But if you're somebody that lives in a city, I really kind of feel like this board is very, very close to what you get from the Stoke. If you're looking for a board to get you from point A to point B, but not too far, because from my experience, the length of the deck and the width isn't one that I'd want to be riding 20, 30 miles with if I was to get lots of extra batteries. You know, you're kind of like commutes that are maybe sort of like 5 to 8 miles. This is the perfect size deck to be able to use. Or if you just want to go out and do tricks, drift the board, 180, sliding it, dancing on it, this is definitely going to be the board that I'd strongly recommend looking at. Now, of course, what I want to do is hand over to Ricky so he can give you some information about his experience riding his board. He had the Tesseract deck along with the race kit, so 2 motors, 2 hubs. I'll let you see what he has to say about his board.
So when it comes to my experience of riding this board, it's been very, very similar to Chris. So I don't want to sort of go over and just repeat everything that he's said. So I'm going to keep mine short and sweet. But essentially, I had a different deck to what Chris had. Now, this deck had sort of a double kick tail on it, so you was able to do the 180 slide and then kick that tail back round for another 180. So the deck of this board was really, really nice, the way that it felt. But one thing that was a little bit off for me was the fact that the bushings are so hard. I had the trucks loosened as physically loose as I could turn them without the nut coming off, and I still just couldn't put enough weight into the board to be able to get that to slide, that maneuver that I really was looking for. So I had to swap out the bushings for softer bushings on this board. Not a big deal, you know, they're not expensive, so just bear that in mind. If you are a light rider like myself, about 69, 70 kilos, then you might want to invest in some softer bushings for this board. But once I put the softer bushings on, just being able to carve the board, slide the board out, it just felt absolutely amazing. It was really, really, like Chris said, we've just sort of got into sliding the boards, and these boards are essentially the perfect boards for sliding. So really impressed with the way this board actually felt and performed. And once I got those softer bushings in, just maneuvering the board, sliding the board was just felt so good. So another thing about this board is the fact that with the Paris trucks that are on it, they're not double kingpin trucks. So with, you know, we always go on about how much we love double kingpin trucks, and coming from double kingpin trucks and jumping on a board with just a single truck is really a funny sensation, and it really does take a little bit of getting used to. Once you do get used to it, carving on the board just feels just as nice as it would with double kingpin trucks. The only sort of benefit I would say from the double kingpin trucks is you do have a little bit more of a maneuverability in the trucks themselves to be able to really tight turn and really get some weight behind the board to slide it out. But apart from that, once you got used to actually carving on this board, it felt amazing. So touching a little bit upon the actual system that Loaded provides you. Now, this is a modular system, which means essentially you could put it onto any deck of your choice. If you don't like the decks that Loaded have, you can simply buy the kit itself and put it onto any skateboard deck, which I think is really, really nice. I've actually got a nice deck come in, a drop-down deck, so I'm actually debating whether I might take this kit on, put it on that just to see exactly how it feels and if there's any differences. So let us know in the comment section down below if you'd be interested in seeing that. But I think that's about it. I mean, Chris has pretty much covered everything there is to know about this board, and essentially the boards that we've got are the same, apart from the decks are slightly different in size and shape. But essentially, it's a great board. Highly recommend it. If you haven't liked and subscribed, consider doing so to stay up to date with all the videos that we post. But once again, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.